the broader society that could influence us. And these are the major general environmental factors that you got to be cognizant of. You got to try to predict. You got to be aware of. What is called economic. What's going on in the economy. We got to know that, so we know what our opportunities and threats are. I'm sure you make investment decisions. In your stage of life, you got to invest, especially in Korea. Man, I mean, it's zero interest rates now almost. And so we're going, following Japan and other developed nations. So where are you going to invest your money? Not in the bank, And if you leave it, in the bank, and because of inflation, your children aren't going to have anything. So you've got to keep on making investment decisions. As you make these investment stock decisions, you got to know what the economy is like. For example, just an example. I asked my son, he's Juyong, he's in middle school. I said, hey, Juyong, what do you think about Abe, man? And he said, Abercrombie? All you know is Abercrombie and Fitch. It's not Abercrombie and Fitch. It's Abenomics. You gotta know what the hell Abenomics is and how that's gonna affect our company and me. Right now, you're going to travel to Japan. How is Abenomics going to affect me as a traveler to Japan? Oh, you got to know this economic environment. EU, what's going on there? In terms of their growth. Technological environment. You got to know what's going on in the technology environment. First in the computer industry, I'm sure everybody knows. Moore's law. Who's Moore? This guy named is Gordon Moore. He co-founded Intel with Andy Grove. And for a long time in the industry, it was Moore's law. We'll take a look at the first computer case of Dell Computer, the first case. But Moore's law, it says the transistors, the speed of computers will basically will double every 18 months. But now nobody talks about Moore's law anymore in terms of technology. What's the law now in the world? Huang's law. Who the hell is Huang?
황창규.
Huang Thank you. The two people several years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, two people, they were both concurrently on the major newspapers. The two Huangs that are dominating Korea. Hwang Chang-kyu, Vice President of Samsung, and Hwang Woo-seok.
Hwang In-tae.
Yeah, and then one is the KT President, one goes like, trying to get on. Anyways. And Hwang's law, he was the vice president of Samsung. He's now the president and CEO of KT Telecommunication. And Hwang's law, when he was working at Samsung, the speed of computers will double every 6 months. And that's Hwang's law. And so technology continues to be changing, And how's that going to affect? How about electric cars? Along several years ago to recent time, we thought everything is going to be dominated by electric cars. Oil is gone. But it's changed again. Because of what? Oil is on the comeback. Because of shale gas. You guys know shale? Shale gas? Because of shale gas, oil companies are on the rebound now. And then a few years ago, everything was solar. It's like the Dutch, wind, solar. That's going to dominate now. Oil is on the back, come back. And who has the most shale gas in the world? The U.S. and China. They are the G2. They also are the G2 because of shale gas. They are the two countries that have the most shale gas in the world. And so they're both on the rebound now. Not rebound, they were very big anyways. And so these are things we have to know about in terms of technology, to know what opportunities we have. Political and legal, to make any decision as an organization, you've got to know what Park Geun-hye is doing right now, for a Korean at least, and then even for, not Koreans, living in Korea. What is her philosophy, Park Geun-hye? What is she trying to do? And then you got to make decisions, based on that. But don't go against her. You're going to die. To give you an idea, never go against government policy. this was like 6, 7 years ago. A student came to me, a grad student, and said, Professor Lee, I need your advice. What do you think about Sejong City? How is it going to develop and everything? And this is what I told her. Professor Lee, Yonsei University, full professor. I said it to her. I don't think it's going to get developed. Nobody's going to go there. Last week, I went to Sejong City with my mother-in-law and father-in-law. Oh my God. I've never seen a place like this. It's already all developed. And to give you an idea, Professor don't know anything. I don't know anything. Don't ask me anything. You're the worst. Don't ask me for stock advice. Because when information comes to professors, that is the last. That is the worst, Everybody knows, then professor knows. And people get a misunderstanding that professors know anything. Professor Lee, I need your expert advice. What do you think about Sejong City? It's not going to get developed. And so, I mean, what Park Hyun is trying to do in Korea right now? It's tourism. She wants to develop Korea into tourism because she needs employment to raise employment. And you gotta know what's going on right now. Anybody been to Hwasong lately? What is Hwasong? What are they famous for? Hwasong. 경기도 Hwasong. It's a city. Suwon, 경기도 Suwon, the folk village and stuff. I mean, 경기도 Hwasong. What are they famous for right now? You know what they're building? They're almost done. You know what they're building? In Hwasong? They're building Universal Studios. You know that?
Nice.
And they just started? They started the year 2005. How long? 3 years left. And they will open. And the Universal Studios in Hwasong, 경기도 Hwasong, is 6 times larger than the one in Osaka, Japan. It's 5 times larger than the one in Hong Kong. I kid you not. Naver or Google, whatever. And so that's what she's trying to do, And so you got to know what they're doing in terms of policies. So why? Why do we need to know that? Sarah, why do we need to know that?
To build up our own strategy.
It's cold. Shiwan, why do you need to know what President Biden is doing? Why?
To change the outside environment.
It's the outside environment, yes, but why?
It affects our own decision making.
It does! But why do we need to know that? So? What?
You're prepared for when it happens.
So you can know what your opportunities and threats are. That's why you need to know this stuff, guys. Socio-cultural environment. There's so many socio-cultural environment things going on. You gotta know this, guys. Well, one of the biggest ones, these are just examples. One of the biggest ones in terms of socioculture is nobody's having any babies in Korea. It's the biggest problem. Have some babies. You guys are we need babies. You know what determines the strength of a country? What determines the strength, according to Thomas Friedman, the thing that determines the strength of the country, many things, but the 2 main factors is this. The first one is ideas, brain power, creativity, entrepreneurship. That's the first thing that determines the strength of a country. You know what the second factor is?
Birth rate.
It's people, it's population. And Korea is a small country to start with, 40 million, 50 million, in South Korea. Compared, even if we're unified, North Korea has about 25 million, whatever. It's still 60 million, whatever. But the point is, it's getting lower. We're not having any babies anymore. The lowest birth rate in the world is Korea right now. Man, when we start doing something, we do it with the fervor. Whatever it is, World Cup, or not having babies or whatever. And this is a big problem. But we have a teacher that we can learn from. Teachers called Japan. They have low birth rates. They started having low birth rates way before us. So in Japan, there's called hyper old age. What is that? Is 1 out of 5 people are age over 60. That means hyper old age. Korea is not hyper old age yet. 10 years we have left to get there. We'll get there. We're just following exactly what Japan is doing. So you know in Japan, the Japanese, they love statistics. And you know what statistic I saw last month? This is a statistic that came out of Japan. Japan has very low birth rates, sociocultural. They're not having any babies anymore. Korea is going to be the same. But in Japan, old age, people in Japan are dying. They're going to all die. They're going to die by themselves at home because of old age and not having many babies. They live by themselves, and once their spouse dies, they're going to live by themselves at home, and they're going to die by themselves. Korea is going to be the same way. But the statistic that came out last month is this. When a Japanese, sociocultural, low birth rate, when they die by themselves at home, how long will it take for their children to find his dead body? That's the statistic that came out last month. So Japanese, sociocultural, low birth rate, they're going to live by themselves, they're going to die by themselves. When they die, how long will it take for their children to find this guy's dead body at home? How long do you think it'll take? 1 year, Juan says. Anybody else? 3 days. 1 year, 3 days. Well, that's a big variance. When the Japanese, they die by themselves, how long will it take for their children to find his dead body? Well, that depends on if their children are sons or daughters. If this guy has daughters only, it will take 2 weeks to find his dead body. If the dead guy has only sons, it will take 2 months to find his dead body. Why? Because the daughters always call the parents and say, how are you? Are you doing well? The sons never call. It's the same in Japan and Korea. So when that guy dies, sociocultural low birth rate, it depends on whether the daughter 2 weeks they'll find. It takes 2 months if they have sons. And I was reading the statistic and I'm thinking to myself, I have 2 sons. Smelly body, rotting body. Yeah, 2 times 2? 4 months! I'll do that. Yeah, that's it. And I mean, this is the sociocultural environment. You've got to know this to know what opportunities that you have. And then, global environment. What is more to say about global environment? There's nothing we can do in business without using this word global. But it wasn't like this. When I was in college, we didn't think much about global. Really, I didn't see any foreigners in Korea. Really, you know. In class, I didn't see any foreigners. The foreigners I saw in Korea at the time were Mormons. Very nice dressed. Speaking better Korean than me. That's all the foreigners I saw. And then, you know, the companies in Korea, they never had to compete with foreign competition when I was in college. Because they were a monopoly in Korea. Nobody could come in. But now, foreign competitors are coming in the Korean market, picking fights. You know? But we see non-Koreans everywhere because it's the global environment. I can't, you guys probably know much more than I do about how important this is. So if you analyze the global environment, you'll get to know your threats and opportunities. Okay? So the general environment, the way we do a general environmental analysis is called PEST analysis, guys, or STEEP analysis. And this is obviously these are the abbreviations for each of these things. So the P here stands for political, legal, economic, socio-cultural, technological, and then the G stands for global. And so these are the main general environmental factors that you have. Then Hope, well, what am I supposed to do, man? Every day I need to think about this? Of course not. Come on, you can't think about this every day. But you got to think about this from time to time. Think, how's that going to affect me with my wife and my husband as we prepare for life, as we invest for our children? How's that going to affect me? As a manager of this company, how's that going to affect me? And especially, what opportunities and what threats are there for me and my company? And it's really so please, and you know, you guys will probably face another theory and strategy later on. It's called scenario analysis or scenario theory. And it's really cool, and everybody uses it these days. Why? Because we don't know what's going to happen. Nobody knows. And so we make scenarios. And basically how you do a scenario analysis is this. You take the 4 or 5 factors that are the most uncertain in terms of your company, and you make stories based on those factors. And each individual different story, it's called a scenario. But the uncertain factors that we look at to make scenarios are these are the usual suspects. So as a pharmaceutical company, I pick the most uncertain factors here in terms of, and I make scenarios. So let's say 5 years from now, the administration in Korea is going to change. It's not going to be Park Geun-hye administration anymore. It's going to be the Democratic Party or whatever. You know, and this is their philosophy. Technology is going to advance this way. Economic growth is going to be 1% in Korea 5 years. And you take these factors and you make one scenario. And based on that, if that scenario happens, this is going to be our strategy. And then you have a different scenario, whether the political environment is different from this scenario, and technology is different from that. And then you make another scenario. And then you have a strategy for that scenario. And that's the best way we can prepare for an uncertain future, because we don't know what's going to happen. Nobody knows. And scenario analysis, we'll talk more about it later on in the semester, but this is basically how you do it. That's why these are really important, these general environmental factors. So be cognizant of this, think about this, try to predict this, anticipate it, and prepare. The second environment that we have to talk about is called the industry environment. And industry environment, again, is very important. This is more direct. You see, the general environmental factors are really important, but this is the problem. The general environmental factor, when it changes, it's going to come and slap you in the face, so you got to be prepared for this. But this is the problem. As a manager, as an organization, the general environment has a huge impact on me, but I can't really influence the general environment. It's an unfair relationship. Maybe we can influence to some. In terms of politics, we can influence. Or you lobby your senators or your parliamentary leader, and you lobby them to influence. And it's possible to some degree, but it's not that easy. And so the general environment, we've got to know it's important, but we can't really influence it. What has a more direct impact on us as a manager is the industry environment. So I want to concentrate on this today predominantly. And this is the most important strategy because we have more influence on it. The industry environment is this, guys. This is basically an industry environment. Everybody here, every organization is inside an industry, okay? And so this is what we want to do with an industry analysis. Ultimately, we want to know what opportunities and threats are, of course, but industry analysis is this. Is the industry that we are in right now, is it attractive or not attractive? That's the question we are asking, in a nutshell. Or sometimes you want to go into a new industry as an organization. Should we go into solar energy business? Then the question is the solar energy industry, is it attractive or not attractive? That's the question we want to know of industry analysis. Really important. And then how do you do an industry analysis? How do you know if an industry is attractive or not attractive? There are many ways. And then throughout the semester I will show you several other ways. But right now, I will show you the best way in this class. This was developed by a guy named Michael Porter, which everybody knows, right? And Michael Porter developed this 30 years ago. And to this day, it is the best way to do an industry analysis. There's nothing better than this right now. Is it perfect? Of course not. It has limitations, which we should know. But it is the best way. So every business school, Samsung, LG, every company, when they have to know what their industry attractiveness is like, they do a Michael Porter's 5 forces analysis initially. And they complement with other stuff, of course. So let me share with you basically how to do a Michael Porter's 5 forces. And then after the break, we'll give you a mini case so you can read it and we'll discuss and apply it, okay? And keep this theory in your pocket for life. And it'll help you get insight into many issues as manager. Basically, this is Michael Porter's theory. Michael Porter says, in every industry, there are 5 factors. And these are the 5 factors. In every industry, there are these 5 factors. And he says, these 5 factors, they interact. They mingle, interact, And after these 5 forces interact, the interaction of those 5 forces determines the level of competition in the industry. And the level of competition in the industry ultimately determines the performance of the firms in that industry. That's Michael Porter's theory. So these 5 forces, they interact in every industry, And through that interaction, it determines the level of competition in the industry, and the level of competition in that industry ultimately determines the attractiveness of that industry. And that's Michael Porter's theory in a nutshell. Okay. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to go through each of these factors briefly and show you Michael Porter's thinking mechanism into each of these factors. The factors are threat of new entrants, threat of suppliers, threat of buyers, threat of substitute products, and the fifth one is called rivalry, the degree to which you fight it out with your firms within this industry, firms inside your same industry. And these are the 5 factors. And so let me go through each one of these things. The first one is called threat of new entrants. So let's just make an example. Everybody here, including myself, we are inside one industry, let's assume. It can be the automobile industry, it can be the steel industry, airline industry, whatever. Business school industry. Probably that's true. And we're all here. And this is Michael Porter's thinking. The first thing is threat of new entry. If new entrants can enter our industry anytime, as often as they want, then this industry sucks. That's Michael Porter. He would not use that word. He's a very noble guy. I'm not that noble. Actually, I think the best word in the English language is the word sucks. You can use that to anything. You suck, I suck, lecture sucks, Porter sucks. It's such a great word. So I'm going to use it a lot, okay, to connote a lot of things. But if new entrants cannot enter your industry for some reason, or they enter it, but they have a big struggle as they enter the industry, then the industry is a great industry. That's my point. So everybody understands that. So if new entrants can enter, bad industry. New entrants cannot enter, good industry. Then this is the question then. Michael Porter asked. Salamat! Salamat, hey, Michael Porter says, if new entrants can enter the industry, bad industry. If new entrants cannot enter the industry, good industry. Then, Salamat, what determines they're entering the industry? Whether new entrants will enter or not. What determines that? Maybe legislation. Very good, Salamat. One of the things is called legislation. Like government regulation. If there are government regulation in place in the industry, it's going to be very tough for somebody to enter, right? And so we're protected. Great, because they can't enter. If there are no government regulations, then they can enter. Right? And so that's a huge one in terms of Michael Porter. Government regulation would be a big factor in terms of entering and not entering. Chae-san! Hey man! How are you?
Good, thank you.
Okay. Great. What do you think? Anything else? New entrants? What determines them entering or not? Government regulation and legislation is one. How about you, Chae-san? Do you think of anything else?
I think owner's willingness.
Can you be a little more specific? What do you mean by that? I think I know, but yeah. Or not. I mean, it's fine. It's a matter of brevity, So, I mean, of course, that would determine. Managers, are they willing or not? But the willingness also depends on something, though. It's not just when managers decide something, I don't want to do it or do it. Ultimately, they do decide it, but that is a function of something else as well. I mean, something influences the willingness. So I guess that's so legislation will influence the willingness of the owner. If there's a lot of legislation, the owners probably won't enter because it's very difficult to enter. Yes. Go ahead.
Capital requirement.
Huh? Capital requirements. Can you be a little more specific about that?
The industry, the new entrant want to get into this industry, he has to heavily invest in order to just get in, and then after that make it work, and then to be a threat to the other rivals, it needs a lot of money.
Very good. I mean, this is Michael Porter, he talks about this, right? Capital requirements. How much money, especially in the first year, how much money does it take to enter the industry? And then when you say this, though, Sane, people will say, well, doesn't it take money to enter any industry? True. It will take money to enter any industry. But what Michael Porter is talking about in terms of capital requirements is relative degree. For example, how much money does it take to enter the Korean entertainment market to fight with Everland? To build Universal Studios 6 times bigger than Japan's Osaka. It's going to take a lot of money. It takes a consortium. But then, how much capital requirement does it take to enter the internet flower selling business with your wife? Relatively lower. So that's what he's talking about. So think about it. If it takes a lot of money to enter, it's going to break the willingness to enter. Right? But if it doesn't take that much to enter, hey, we can go in tomorrow, man. I'm retiring tomorrow. Okay. So we have legislation, we have capital requirements. This is good. This is good. One more, yes.
No.
Sarah.
The knowledge of the some kind of business requires like IT needs the knowledge to do a better product.
Sure.
So you don't know that.
Sure. I mean, you talk about the word, Sarah talks about knowledge. Knowledge can be very broad. Think about the pharmaceutical industry. To enter the pharmaceutical industry, you need capital requirements, but you also need knowledge, especially in terms of basic research for many, many years. And if you don't have that, it's going to be tough to enter, you know? So knowledge, technology, very broad sense, that would be a factor as well. Yes? Go ahead.
The kind of advantages, first comers of enjoy,
First come advantages.
patents or chance of distribution, they have already maybe some exclusive rights.
Many, many first mover advantages, you know, patents, you know, channels, learning, you know, and capturing the initial market, those kind of things. Oh, okay, great, let me stop there. What is that called? Legislation, knowledge, first mover, advantages in terms of cost issues maybe a little bit, you know, capital requirements. What is this called? It's called barriers? Barriers to entry. It's called entry barriers. So this is what Michael Porter talks about. This is the first factor. If the entrants, they can enter any time, this industry is really bad. Because if they enter, they're going to take away your pie. It's going to increase competition. It's bad for you because we're already inside the industry. If they cannot enter, it's good for us. But what determines that entry is entry barriers, according to Michael Porter. So if there are a lot of entry, what are entry barriers? These are the entry barriers you guys talked about. You know, these are the sum, capital requirements, economies of scale, product differentiation. You know, this is called brand identity, brand loyalty. Think about it. Think about the entry barriers. You decide to enter the beverage industry in the U.S. Beverage industry in the U.S. dominated by Coke and Pepsi. You decide to enter. Then you got to think about what are the entry barriers in the soft drink industry. And there's many, but one of them is called product differentiation. Coke and Pepsi, while they fight with each other for 100 years, they've erected this product differentiation using sports stars, you know, celebrities, advertising to get the brand awareness of their products. And you got to think, if I enter the U.S. soft drink industry, how many years do I have to advertise to get that brand identity away from thinking it's not that easy? And it's called product differentiation. Access to distribution channels, government regulations. Yes, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just, you mentioned that for most companies it would be, they wouldn't look at it as an opportunity if there's not a lot of entry barriers, because that makes it easy for whoever wants to access this market or industry. but that also in some ways can be attractive because if you're an industry that can really expand and just boost itself, then sometimes it's nice to just be able to be a part of that for a few years and then move out. So I was just wondering if you agree with this. I mean, it's not always a bad thing if it's just an open market, you know. Survival of the fittest.
Well, I was going to address this a little bit later, but this is a really important point. I give you a choice. Behind A is an industry that has high entry barriers. Behind door B is an industry that has really low entry barriers. Which one would you prefer as a company? A, high entry barriers, or B, low entry? Take a vote. I would prefer A, door number A, an industry with high entry barriers. Raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. No, I prefer B, an industry with low entry barriers. I think that's better. Raise your hands. Okay. Oh, again, very similar. It would be A. You know, when we think about it, we would say B because entry barriers are low. Of course, it's good because we can enter the industry. But once we enter the industry, it sucks because anybody can. So it gets a little confusing, but when you think about it, you guys know very quickly, actually you need to find an industry as a manager with high entry barriers. That's what you need to find. But then Hope, didn't you say you can't enter if the entry barriers are high? Yeah, you can't enter. That's the problem. So what am I supposed to do, man? You gotta find a way. You gotta use your creativity and find a way to overcome those high entry barriers. Because once you're inside, yes, sure.
But doesn't that depend on how big my company is? I mean, there is such thing as mission responsibility. If my company is very small, there's no way that I can enter the industry that I want to enter. If that's the case, that company means that I have to enter the other industry that is and I go into there. So I mean, I guess that's the thing that is important.
I mean, he's right. I mean, what we're assuming right now is all else are equal. But then all else are not equal. So we have a lot of factors to consider. Obviously, if you're a very small company and the entries are really high, then you don't want to commit suicide by entering. You enter, but then you're dead. You don't want to do that, obviously, And some do make that mistake. It's called escalation of commitment. Once it's like the Vietnam War. Once you start doing it, you can't stop. And everybody says you got to do it. You can do it. But then it's like pouring, bad money after good money after bad. And so Juan is exactly right. So when you think about these issues, everything is all else equal. But then if all else is not equal, then you got to think about our company size and all these things. And maybe, as Juan said, you want to start with an industry that has low entry barriers and start with there, and then build up your company. And we'll talk about this later on as we talk about business level strategies and those things. But that's right. But I'm not saying this just to be on extreme points. If everything is equal, because my students get confused sometimes. It's better to find an industry that has high entry barriers. But it's difficult to enter an industry with high entry barriers. So what you have to do is you have to find a way. Not commit suicide, but find a way. That's how England's Cadbury Schweppes. Cadbury Schweppes is one of the top 10 companies in England. And then they make chocolate, drinks and all these things. And they wanted to enter the US soft drink fund. But it was so tough. Because they have brand identity, all these entry barriers, but they wanted it because once they entered, it's going to be good. But they couldn't enter. But they entered. How did Cadbury Schweppes enter the U.S. soft drink industry? How do you overcome high entry barriers? Many ways. Creativity. The way they entered was they used an acquisition. They acquired Dr. Pepper. And they entered the U.S. soft drink industry and used Dr. Pepper to start with that, and then their products later on. And so, managers are smart. Just because there are a lot of entry barriers doesn't mean you can never enter. Sometimes you can never enter. It's called the Japanese market. Never enter that market. Don't even try. To give give you an idea of how difficult to enter the Japanese market is, to give you an idea of government regulation, there's this company in the US called, and you'll later on you'll see this in the case. There's a company in the US called, this is an example of entry barriers, example of government regulation, example is an example of sometimes you can never enter the industry, or very tough. There's a company in the US called IGT, and later on when you read the mini case, you'll know exactly what they are, but it stands for International Game Technology. It's a US company, and it is the biggest company. It was the biggest company in the 1990s in this industry. What do you think they made? IGT, International Game Technology. Video games, good guess, similar. IGT, International Game Technology, the biggest company. They make slot machines. They are the biggest maker of slot machines in the USA in the 1990s. Well, honest to God, guys, IGT had a strategy retreat. Every company has a strategy retreat, right? Once or twice a year they get together, go to Disneyland or whatever. And IGT had a strategy retreat, and the CEO of IGT got all of his executives together, and they were talking about IGT's strategy and getting ideas, And as the CEO listened to all the executives, he said, after he listened to everybody, he said, okay guys, you have it all wrong. IGT has only one strategy. IGT strategy, this is the 1990s. IGT strategy is Japan. That's what you go around for. Strategy. Everybody, what? Our strategy is Japan? Why? He said, forget about everything else. All you need to think about is this. That's what the CEO of IGT said. Why did the IGT CEO say their strategy is Japan, you think? Yeah?
Because Japanese are into pachinko machines.
Pachinko? You're right. In the 1990s, did you know Japan in the 1990s had 2/3 of the world's slot machines in Japan in the 1990s? 2/3 of the world's slot machines is in Japan in the 1990s. And IGT is a maker of slot machines. So this CEO, he wants to enter Japan market bad. And so he knocked on the Japanese market. And this is what the Japanese government said. You want to enter the Japanese market? Okay. All right, man. You got to satisfy 3 conditions of our government. And the IGT CEO said, sure, well, I'll satisfy them all right now. What are they? And this is what the Japanese said. Our first condition. For you to sell slot machines in the Japanese market, you have to make your slot machines based on the Japanese quality, standard. That's it's called JS standard. The size of it, the quality, and all that stuff. You got to meet those requirements of standards. And IGT president said, I'll change everything of our company to meet those standards. No problem, man. Let me enter. And then the Japanese said, so desu ka? Second requirement. Okay. Second requirement is you have to be a member of the Japanese Slot Machine Trading Association to sell slot machines to Japan. That's the second condition. And the IGT president, to be a member of the Japanese tribe, let me be a member today. I will pay twice the fee, membership fee. Let me enter. And then the Japanese government said, so, I don't want to irritate you too much. The name is so smart, she goes like this. So this guy. And then, okay. IGT wants to enter the Japanese slot machine market because 2/3 in the 1990s, 2/3 of the world's slot machine is in Japan because of pachinko and all that stuff. And to enter, the 3 conditions. The first one is you have to meet the standards of the slot machines of Japan. Every country has a standard. We'll meet it, no problem. Second condition is you have to be a member of the Japanese Slot Machine Trading Association. So no problem. And then the final condition is this, though. Japan said. But to be a member of the Japanese Trading Association,
you must be Japanese.
You have had to already been selling slot machines in Japan for 3 years. That's the Japanese legislation. It's like, you're the president of IGT, is like going crazy. I mean everything in it. what is he saying? To enter and sell, you have to meet our standards. We'll meet them, no problem. But to know what those standards are, you have to be a member of the Japanese Trading Association. We will be a member. But to be a member, you have to already been selling slot machines in Japan for the past 3 years. What does that mean? It means tame desu. Sorry. It means don't. It's Japanese, sorry. 日本語話せます？ちょっとすいません。It means do not enter. And so this is the government, and they could not enter for a long time. 2/3 of the world's slot machines. Yes, Sarah.
First, they put this condition to it's like somebody did it. So maybe providing the machines through a supplier for 3 years and then joining the, I don't know how,
How they enter?
No, how could they put some this kind of legislation?
Regulation?
How could they?
How could they do that?
Yeah.
Because it's Japan. I'm telling you, Japan. How many Hyundai automobiles? They have 10% of the U.S. market. Can you imagine that? The U.S. market, so big. Hyundai Motor Corporation, starting with this, they started with the Pony, The Pony, this is what happened to the Pony. You push on the accelerator, the car breaks down. Now they have 10% of the U.S. market because my uncle drove a Pony in the 1980s. And they have a big size of the European market too. Although they have great players there as well. And then, do you know how many Hyundai cars are there in Japan right now?
Thousands.
Last I checked, they had 2.
2?
Yeah, most driven by Korean people. They had to smell it inside Japan. Sorry, it's a joke. Hyundai is out of the Japanese market. They've been out several months, I think. They give it up. They wanted to sell some. For many, many years, they were there. They don't sell any. This is the Japanese market. It's tough. Why? Various reasons, I guess. But there are a lot of Mercedes-Benz in Japan. There are a lot of BMWs in Japan. There are a lot of Starbucks in Japan. McDonald's. But no Hyundai. And it's not just because of nationalism, I don't think. It's not because of the bad blood between Korea and Japan in history. I don't think that's the main reason. It's just tough to enter the Japanese market. And for some companies have been successful. Anyways, Japan is notorious. And this is an example of entry there. Let me go on. Let me just go on a little bit more quicker to finish this off. The second thing that Michael Ford talks about is the threat of suppliers. Okay? And I'm just going to go through these, so just bear with me. The threat of suppliers. So this is his argument. If suppliers in your industry are really powerful, then the industry again sucks. That's what he says. If the suppliers are not powerful, then the industry is really good. That's his argument. And then this is his contribution, though. With his research, through his research, he showed us the factors that make suppliers' power high and low. And I sort of summarized this from his article and book. So just for your, for your reference, so take a look. These are just some of the main ones, and I'll just go over some of them. If some of them don't make sense to you or not, just let me know and we'll talk about it. But one is when the reason that suppliers are powerful is when the industry is dominated by one or a few suppliers. Then the suppliers have all the power. And again, that means the industry is bad because the suppliers have all the power. Another factor is not only the industry is dominated by a few suppliers, the supplier's product is very differentiated. Then the supplier's more power. And these are some of the factors I've talked. When you really think about these stuff that we will learn in strategy, I really, believe me, it helps you make life decisions. Because these things are not just about business. Because we are in a business class, we talk about business, but you can use this to talk about your life strategy. And then hopefully you will be able to do so through this strategy class and the things that we learn together. You will use it to your life. For example, Michael Porter says suppliers are powerful when they're very unique, differentiated. Think about basketball. In my generation, the best basketball player in the world, in my generation, was Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan was a supplier to the Chicago Bulls. Then we can ask this question. Michael Jordan as a supplier to the Chicago Bulls, was his power high or low? And we would say high. Why would his power be high? There is only one Michael Jordan. He is very unique. He sells a very differentiated product because he is the best basketball player of all time. He's very good looking. He gives a lot to charity. And all these things make him very unique. So, when the Chicago Bulls had to make the decision of whether to fire the coach or not, do you think Michael Jordan had a lot of influence in that decision? Yes. Compare that to another player on the Chicago Bulls in their heyday. Scottie Pippen. I love Scottie, but he's not as unique as Michael Jordan, I'm telling you. So probably Scottie Pippen had less power as a supplier than Michael Jordan. The person that has more power than Michael Jordan, I guess, would only be Dennis Rodman. Meets Kim Jones. Happy birthday. And another reason that makes the supplier powers high is when the buyers are not that important to the supplier. Then the supplier has all the power. This is the third one. Just one example. This is the third one. I'm POSCO. I have two buyers. I sell steel. I have two buyers. One buyer is Hyundai Motor Corporation, and another buyer from POSCO, selling steel, is an arts major at Hongik Art University, where she uses art, or he uses art to make a product. Well, from POSCO's perspective as a supplier, who is more important to me? Hyundai Motor Corporation or the artist that uses steel? It would be Hyundai is much more important to POSCO. You see, the artist in Hongik University, the starving artist, although she starves, it's not that important to POSCO. And so these are the reasons. And then another one is supplier's power is high when this is it. I'm your supplier, but tomorrow, if through our meeting we decide to forward integrate. Forward integrating means as a supplier, you enter that industry. If they have that potential, the suppliers in the industry, as opposed to, I'm your supplier, but that's my fate. I'm always going to be a supplier. You can never forward integrate. Then their power is relative. And so, taking these things into consideration, when you analyze an industry, if a lot of these factors are in play, that means the power of suppliers is very high. That means the industry sucks because the suppliers take all the profits. As opposed to, if it's the opposite of this, then it means you have the power. It's a great industry. That's not important. The third factor is the threat of buyers. And the threat of buyers is exactly the same as suppliers. It's the same coin, guys. It's just the other side of the coin. So every industry has buyers, consumers. It's just that the buyers are different. You know, sometimes the buyer is for KEPCO, the Korean utility company. Their main buyer is the Saudi government because they sell nuclear reactors. You know, sometimes buyers are companies. Samsung Electric has no idea what Hope wants because we have never met. We have no interface. Samsung Electric, their buyer is companies, and sometimes end consumers are the buyer for many companies as well. And so Michael Porter says, if the buyers in the industry are very powerful, the industry sucks. And if the buyers are not powerful, man, what a great existence for us. Then again, his contribution is, through his research, he showed us when the power of buyers will be high, and these are the main ones I just summarized. The first one is a firm, buyer is powerful when a firm has only one or a small number of buyers, guys. If the industry has very few buyers, then the buyers are very powerful. Give you an example. Companies like McDonnell Douglas, Halliburton, have you heard about Halliburton? Huge company. McDonnell Douglas, Boeing to some degree. What is their main product? Planes, but what kind of planes? it's predominant, especially Halliburton and McDonnell Douglas, Boeing to some degree, it's military equipment. Halliburton makes military aircraft, helicopters, and planes. And so, for these companies, who are their main buyers?
Government.
More specifically,
U.S.
it's
government.
the U.S. Department of Defense. That is their main buyer. Because they only have one buyer, the U.S. government has all the power. Now, if you do this analysis and you want to talk about terrorists around the world, then the analysis changes. There are many buyers. And it screws up this analysis, okay? So we gotta get rid of the terrorist component, okay? Just make that constant, because that screws up the analysis. But forgetting the terrorists, for these companies, mainly one buyer. And the US government, they are, hey, let me ask you one basic question. Why are we concerned with power? Why are we concerned with powerful buyers? So what if they're powerful? What the hell can they do to us? On the other hand, the same thing. Why are we concerned with powerful suppliers? Because that's what we're trying to answer. Well, so who cares? What can the supplier do to us if they're powerful? Can they come and slap us in the face? Why do you give a damn if the power supplier is high or low? What can they do? Yes? Bargaining power. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Power means bargaining power. So when the supplier has a lot of bargaining power and the buyers have a lot of bargaining power, well, these are the factors. Well, why do we care about that? I'm saying. What can they do to us? Alex?
They can just cut you off. Like
Who can?
the supplier, they have other people so that they cannot supply you anymore when you have to go and find a new supplier. The buyer can go buy from somebody else.
That's it. Basically what Alex is saying is that the powerful suppliers and buyers, they can come and slap you in the face. That's how they slap you in the face, guys. You know how suppliers, if they're powerful, they slap you in the face? They increase their price of their supplies. And because they're powerful, what can you do? Okay, more. And they can reduce the quality of their supplies. That's how they slap you in the face. And what can you do if you have no power and the suppliers have the power? You got to take that product that sucks. And then the buyers are the opposite. The reason that powerful buyers are a problem is that they can ask for price decreases. Reduce that price, I'm not going to buy. And if they're powerful, you got to buy. You got to reduce. And they can ask for price increase, quality increases, a powerful buyer. So the U.S. government, because they are the principal buyer to these companies, they can exert their power and say to Halliburton, lower the price of your products, or I'm not going to buy. Increase the quality of your helicopters, or I'm not going to buy. And they have to do it. And this is why powerful buyers and suppliers are a big problem for you in the industry. Suppliers' products are undifferentiated and standardized. This is exactly the opposite. If the supplier's power is very differentiated, yes, they have a lot of power, but if their product is very standardized, then they don't have much power. This is why traditionally farmers do not have much power. You know, it's the middlemen have all the power because the product of farmers, supplier is not that differentiated. Some people say it is differentiated. Tomato is a tomato. Potato is a potato. All right. But basically, so farmers traditionally don't get much power. Buyers represent a credible threat to integrate backwards. You see, I'm a buyer now, but if I change my mind tomorrow, I can integrate backwards. And if the buyer integrate backwards, it means they're entering the main industry, the supplier industry. And if they have that potential, the powers have a job. And then Michael Ford talks about if the buyers have more information, of course they will have more power. So these are some of the factors that you need to think about. The fourth factor in terms of Michael Ford's 5 forces is the threat of substitutes. And what he's saying is this: if there are a lot of substitutes for your product and services in the industry, again, the industry sucks. What sucks more is there are a lot of substitutes, but their quality is better. Man, that really sucks. But what sucks more than that is there are a lot of substitutes, their quality is better, but their price is less. Then this is the worst thing that can ever happen. But if it's the opposite case, there's not that many substitutes for our product and service. There are some substitutes, but it's really expensive. There are some substitutes, but the quality is really bad. Then you know, we'll take a look at as regarding the substitutes. And so that's the fifth factor. You got to think and analyze how many these substitutes are out there for your industry's product or services. Final factor, guys, threat of rivalry. This is the big one. Michael Porter says, if there's a lot of rivalry in the industry, it is really bad. Miserable existence. If there's not that much rivalry in the industry, man, it's a good industry. And then again, his contribution is, through his research, he showed us the factors that lead to high rivalry. And these are the main ones, okay? So hopefully you can think about these things. One is numerous competitors. If there are a lot of competitors in the industry,